Hi, everybody. Welcome to NewsNite for Friday, January 27th. Great to have you with us this week. First Energy opting to close 6 plants, 4 of them in Ohio, rather than comply with the EPA. Is it a smart decision? The city of Akron looks to reorganize its police department. Can they really do much with so few officers on the streets? And does anybody in Akron really care if the media covers the Jimmy Dimora trial? These stories and more next on NewsNite. A blustery Friday evening, hopefully some great conversation ahead. Let's meet our panel. Stephanie Warsmith joins us this week from the Akron Beacon Journal. Great to welcome Phil Trexler here this week, also from the Akron Beacon Journal. And 3 in a row from the Beacon Journal, we're glad to welcome Steve Hoffman, the Beacon Bunch, on NewsNite this week. Did you guys all carpool?
No, we should have. Do that next time.
All right, big savings in energy. Yeah, carpool. Speaking of energy, dovetail, First Energy opting this week to close 6 plants, 4 of them here in Ohio, 3 in Northeast Ohio, costing about 500 jobs. These are older coal plants. They say they just can't afford to keep open with the EPA regulations that are on their shoulders. Good move or a bad move in this economy?
Well, I think you have to look at the broader context of where we're going with energy. These are older plants, as you noted. Most of them are backup plants, which are only used for peak period. And we're sort of, as President Obama said this week in the State of the Union speech, we're sort of moving toward a more diverse energy strategy. And to keep investing in these older coal-fired plants, to me, it really doesn't make any sense. And there's some other benefits which get lost in the equation sometimes. You talk about lost jobs and the onerous effects of EPA regulations, as Senator Portman did. There are flip sides to this. One is that the reason we have these clean air regulations is to protect people's health. And there's a cost to that. Granted, it's not easily measured in the immediate, in the here and now, but there are definitely health costs associated with putting mercury and other pollutants into the atmosphere. The other thing is you move toward a more diverse energy portfolio, if you will. There are jobs being created. I mean, we have this oil shale boom going on in Ohio, and one hopes we'll have some continued advances in renewable energy as well that create jobs.
There's also going to be hurting the economy. I know in Eastlake, for example, they're going to be losing millions of dollars in tax revenue just from the closing of the Eastlake plant. So there are some costs there to taxpayers and to the government, and I mean that's a huge drop. Millions of dollars have been lost just to Eastlake alone. So that's there's a price to pay there.
Well, Senator Portman coming out criticizing the Obama administration, believing the EPA had too much reach here to force too high regulations and ended up costing us jobs. But on the flip side, aren't the environmentalists just championing this?
Yeah, they think it's a big win because the better air, the happier they are. And again, as Steve said, there's costs involved when you try to clean up the air. There's going to be changes. It's going to be expensive, and in this case, you're losing hundreds of jobs and millions of dollars in tax revenue. So it's not an immediate win, that's for sure.
And you mentioned the EPA and the EPA staff this week reaching a deal with the city or an agreement or a handshake?
Well, they have another agreement. The EPA and the city have come to another agreement on the sewers issue that has been going on forever and ever here. But now the question is going to be whether the federal judge involved, Judge Adams, is going to approve this agreement. He did not approve the last agreement. This one is similar in terms of the time frame, which is not what he wanted. He wanted a more immediate fix to the overflows into the local streams. But it does have some other things in it that he may like, and so we'll see whether he says, okay, this one's okay, you can go forward with it, or whether he says this still isn't good enough.
And the delays are costing Akron more money? Is it more expensive to fix it?
Well, Akron is moving forward with some of the projects that they know that they're going to have to do to try to address the problems with their sewer overflows. But it is true that it continues to get more expensive, and that's one of the arguments that the city has made, that they've been willing to move forward, but they don't necessarily want to do, a whole host of improvements and then find out that isn't sufficient for the EPA.
Okay, you talked about moving forward. The city of Akron this week announcing it'd like to move forward, at least from the police chief, on a new plan to reorganize the Akron Police Department. The department, guys, is down to a little over 400 officers, the lowest that I can remember. Is there really that many chess pieces that they can play with at this point?
There aren't a lot of chess pieces, and that's part of the problem. They're down 20% from their peak about 10 years ago. So 1 out of 5 officers is now off of that force. 10 years ago, they were manning a bunch of different units, a gang unit, traffic unit. They had community relations and whatnot, a lot of specialty units. And those are the areas where Chief Jim Nice is trying to move his chess pieces around to better patrol the city. Talking to some detectives, they have caseloads of 50, 60, 70 active investigations going on, which is mind-boggling to think how are any cases being solved when one detective has that many cases on his plate. But clearly, this is not 10 years ago. Clearly, they're not going to go back to the days of 500 officers. It's going to be 400. That's the way it's going to be for the short term, long term probably. And you have to make better use of the resources that you have. And I think that's what the city's trying to do. And the union, meanwhile, is sitting back and carefully watching what changes are going to be coming and the changes that are going to be proposed. And I think it was a good idea that the chief, once his plan is settled, he's going to meet with the union and go over the plan before it's submitted to City Hall.
How many officers might be involved in switching around?
He said only 1 out of 10 officers are going to be even affected by any reorganization. So that's his pledge, that's his promise, and we'll see if that's feasible.
A tough challenge?
It is a difficult challenge, but I agree with Phil. There's really not many options. Clearly you're not going to go back to a much larger police force. I think the idea with these breaking up some of these units, these smaller units, is not that they're not going to try to address these problems, but they need to address them in a different way. They need to have more flexibility. They need to get officers out into the street as much as possible, relieve them from administrative and desk duty as much as possible, and have flexibility in assigning people. So one of the ideas I think here is to use technology, to use data to direct the resources you have to where the problems are. This idea that Paul Helinski continues to promote, that there is a direct and immediate relationship between the number of officers on the street and the crime rate, it's not true. And he continues to promulgate this idea. Last year we had a fairly low crime rate for most of the year with a smaller number of officers. So the idea is to work smarter, try to get ahead of problems before they become big problems. You're just not going to have a cop on every corner, even if that were a deterrent, which many people feel it really isn't.
Risk of burnout when you have fewer guys and you're demanding so much of them?
Well, yeah, and I think that there are one-man cruisers out there a lot more often now than you have, and I think that some of the different police groups would tell you that there's risk involved with that. But one of the other things is that the independent, well, I don't know if you call it independent, but the perf group that took a look at the police department and what changes were needed there, talked about them needing to go more into the community-oriented policing realm and really trying to, have officers tied into neighborhoods more where they understand what the problems and issues are there. And so that may be, one way that they want to try to focus what the police department is doing, because if you know about the problems beforehand, then maybe you're dealing with those some more than you are now, rather than going from call to call to call and trying to do some prevention out there.
Is the union in a position to veto these kind of moves?
Well, if any of the moves violate their contract, then obviously they're going to be, likely fighting those. But I think that there are changes that they can make within the scope of the contract, depending on what they ultimately decide to do.
And they're watching that. They realize what the contract is, and City Hall's going to be checking. There are attorneys that are not going to, go and cross that line intentionally. I think that they want to have a peaceful resolution to this, and hopefully have everybody understand that it affects everyone, and that this is in the best interest of the department and the city. Okay,
I want to talk about where some other officers might be a helpful resource if they go that route as we move the conversation now to newsnight.net.
For more NewsNight content, including extended discussions, full interviews, and the chance to speak your mind about the issues, join us online at newsnight.net.
Richard Beasley in court this week. In fact, just after our broadcast was taped last week, Summit County Prosecutor Sherry Bevan Walsh and Ohio's Attorney General held a press conference to update us on the Beasley case. Phil, you and I were both there. Yeah. I think the key moment was when Mike DeWine said there might still be more victims out there.
Yeah, that's the scary part. The background, obviously, is he's accused of making creating a Craigslist ad for a help-wanted situation down in Noble County, and guys were lured down there with the promise of a job. And in fact, they wound up getting robbed and murdered. Yeah, DeWine, I don't know what he's basing it on, if there's more information that's coming out or what, but, where there's 3, there may be 5, there may be 10. We don't know. We do know in the background there that there has been a breakdown in plea negotiations with the young kid, Brogan Rafferty, the Stowe High School kid. Mm-hmm. They felt that there was a plea bargain in place between Noble County prosecutors and Brogan Rafferty's attorneys. However, I'm understanding that plea deal has been blown up, and now they're starting fresh again. That's why the case was moved to Summit County. He would provide great testimony to the prosecutors in the Beasley case. They're seeking the death penalty there, so they need to have as strong a case as possible in order to win there. There's no coincidence at all that 2 bodies were recovered on the same day around the time that Brogan Rafferty was cooperating with authorities in separate counties, 100 miles away.
In remote areas.
Right. So the problem right now is how much time does Brogan Rafferty have to serve in prison in order for him to provide what would be key testimony against Beasley.
But he's an accomplice to multiple murders. But how much credence do we really place in that there might be more bodies? I guess they made the argument that they know other people looked at the ad. They know that some other people may have called on the ad, and if you haven't talked to your relative, and especially a male relative, in the last 3 or 4 months to give them a call. So do you think they're going to be able to make a new deal with Brogan Rafferty?
I think they're working toward it. It's the key issue is how many years do you want the kid to serve? What's an appropriate sentence? And talking to John Alexander, the attorney for Brogan Rafferty, that's going to be the key. Everyone acknowledges that Rafferty's cooperating with the investigation. However, it's stopped apparently now until this plea deal is
Why do this
arranged.
all in Summit County? 2 of the bodies and the one who escaped were all in Noble County. We had 1 murder here in Summit County. So the vast majority of the crimes that we know of were to the south. Why are we doing it here?
Well, because we elect prosecutors. And
politics is at play
and
here?
Prosecutors love cases like this. They can stand up at a press conference. They can be tough. This is obviously a sensational, highly unusual case. I think there will be more bodies. Certainly, in this economy, you can imagine many people responding to an ad like this. I mean, it wasn't a wonderful job, but it was not a bad one either if you're down on your luck. So, we love to. Prosecutors love this kind of stuff.
And I thought it was interesting, too, yesterday when Mr. Beasley was in court talking about his ability to get a fair trial and a fair jury, and that's why he's shielding his face because he's afraid that there's going to be some pretrial publicity against him. At the same time, Judge Lynn Callahan, who has been assigned his death penalty case, issued a gag order, so here we are again. There was a gag order in place in Noble County. Now Lynn Callahan has placed a gag order up here, so apparently did this on her own based on perhaps some of the publicity that's been, it's obviously a high-profile case, so she's barring everybody associated with the case from talking about it. So getting information out to the public is going to be more difficult for us.
We see this guy in court, and as you were tweeting, from the courtroom, he's got his hands over his face the whole time. He seems very feeble. This guy's personality must be completely different, though, isn't it?
Yeah, I think people are getting, the people at the jail particularly, are getting a little frustrated with the old wheelchair, feeble old man routine. I don't think that they're buying it. I understand that he's going to have his wheelchair taken away from him. He doesn't use it any other time except when he's being wheeled into court. I think that they feel as he's malingering there for sympathy or for whatever reason, and they've had enough of it.
All right. Well, that certainly is the case that will come. The case that is going on right now, the biggest case in Northeast Ohio, is happening literally a couple hundred feet from where we're taping this broadcast. The trial of Jimmy Dimora as Cuyahoga County's corruption case comes to Summit County. But are anybody in Summit County really talking about this? The Cuyahoga County press is down here on a daily basis. The rest of us that cover Akron on a regular basis, is it a big deal? Is it not a big deal?
Well, some people have been critical for the Beacon for not covering the Dimora trial. And I think the response that we have to that is it's not our story, but yet it is happening in our backyard, so that's interesting. I know we've run some of the Plain Dealer stories because we have a sharing agreement with them where we can run their stories and they can run our stories, But one of the editors said yesterday when we were talking about this, they aren't covering the Craigslist murders like we are. That's our story, and so I think there's really a lot of that around our newsroom when we talk about it, and that's sort of our viewpoint on it.
And also too, the tentacles of this corruption in Cuyahoga County have not stretched across the border into Summit County or Akron. Even though you have some of Plisquelic's enemies saying yes, 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 this is all tied together. No one on an official basis has ever said that. There's not even been a name dropped in the trial so far. As salacious as the accusations are against Jimmy Dimora, with the infidelity and the prostitutes and the gambling junkets and whatnot, no one has ever connected it to Akron. So it's their dirt, and they're covering it, and we pick up the pieces of it every once in a while, and certainly the information and the stories are available on the internet, and I think occasionally the Beacon will pick up bigger stories as they develop in their trial, but it's going to be a 3-month case.
In the short term, this is definitely a Cleveland story. I'm always drawn by the contrast. Whenever you have allegations of wrongdoing around City Hall and county government in Summit County, I mean, all you got to do is look to the north, and I mean, they're pros.
And look at the job the Beacon did with covering Tim Davis back in the day.
Exactly. But there is, in the long term, an important facet to this. It's hard to put your finger on right now, but we operate in the region of Northeast Ohio, and for better or for worse, our fates are linked. Now, Akron and Cleveland and Canton have all had their distinct identities and fight like crazy to keep it so. But the reality is we are much more interconnected than we used to be. And so a dysfunctional government in Cuyahoga County has serious implications for the region. You don't hear, you don't see headlines about it every day. But your ability to attract young talent, your ability to move forward on a number of fronts, to be an attractive place for people to live and work, if everybody's on the take, that's not exactly the kind of environment you're going to leap at necessarily. I mean, there are other factors. I mean, we have a ton of water. We have great universities and hospitals, especially in the Cleveland area. I mean, there are a lot of positives to build on. But, the idea that you're functioning and you have to make deals, a lot of big deals now in terms of relocations and company headquarters have a huge public side to it, as we saw with the Goodyear headquarters here. The public sector is much more involved in economic development. And if it is, if it's just you got to bribe your way through everything, it's not exactly a good thing.
As we look at the Dimora case, though, the radio folks in Akron haven't been covering it either. The suburban newspapers haven't been covering it, but yet we're all in the business of getting eyeballs on our product. This has sex involved, it has crime involved, it has salacious names involved, and it's right there.
And it has puppets involved.
And it has puppets involved.
Right, you just need to go over to
Isn't it tempting, though? Aren't most news organizations tempted to cover something that would really be very easy to cover of its proximity?
Well, but the problem is they're not our guys. They're just not our guys. Our people don't vote for them. Nobody in Summit County voted for Jimmy Dimora or any of these other people. They really have trouble. If you drag somebody off the street, maybe we'll have to do that during the show. But if you dragged Mrs. Fabitz in here from Kenmore and ask her, what she knew about Jimmy Dimora and the rest of these people, they have no real connection. These are not people they voted for. They're not people who made decisions that directly affected their taxes or their lives.
And you mentioned the puppets, which is getting national play, and we'll talk about that now and whether it's important or not, or suitable or not, over on NewsNite.net.
On NewsNite.net, we cover a broader range of topics than we can on the air in 27 minutes. Be part of the conversation on our Facebook page and at NewsNite.net.
To politics now, and Secretary of State John Husted just won't let elections alone. Or will he, Steve? The election about the election, just when we thought this had been settled.
Well, this is all about a House Bill 194 that made many changes in Ohio's election law. It was a very bitter bill passed last summer. it will be on the ballot. It's scheduled to be on the ballot in November for a referendum. So the Secretary of State, I think, legitimately feared a very confusing situation. In other words, in the middle of an election, you are dealing with a campaign back and forth about issues such as absentee balloting, provisional voting, that sort of thing. In other words, about access to the ballot. And so most voters are confused enough about how they can vote and when they can vote and the circumstances around which they vote. So to have this campaign boiling up in the middle of a campaign for president looked like trouble. And so Husted, I think, wisely advocates repealing this bill so that would negate the referendum, wouldn't happen. And then he wants the legislature to grapple again, as they started to, with some of the issues, again, absentee balloting, provisional voting, which many people do think need to be fixed. The problem with the Republican majorities, same phenomenon as with Senate Bill 5. They get a hold of something, they're in the majority, they can't help themselves. A small example, two examples that come to mind with House Bill 194. They drastically slashed the period for early in-person voting. Really no need to cut it so sharply, but they did. And
was there big cost savings? Was there
no, I think the cost savings are minimal.
They think that it benefits the other side.
Yeah, clearly. And then another little gem in House Bill 194, which I reread again yesterday, is poll workers would not be allowed to direct a voter to the proper precinct. Well, in Ohio, you have to vote in the right precinct for your vote to count. So why have poll workers? Again, this is just a question of ballot access, how you can fiddle with the other side.
So customer service would be out?
Well, in that respect, and some others, yes. So I think Husted's trying to do the right thing. Whether the Republican majority in the Senate and the Republican majority in the House go along with it, I don't know. There are some Republicans in the Senate who claim that they've been talking about this and that they've been thinking about this all along. I guess I have to say we'll see. I hope something does happen. I hope they get this issue off the ballot. It'd be expensive. It would be confusing, and then it would give them a chance to go back and, rethink this.
Why can't we get elections fixed here, Phil? Why is it so
because
difficult
of the shift
in
of
Ohio?
power. It's the shift of power. Whoever's in charge gets to make the rules, and that's what's happening here. You talk about the precinct issue. I'll tell you, when I go to vote, it seems like that's the dreaded question when you walk in there. What precinct am I in? Because the people who are running the poll workers there are just. That's the question they hate to be even answered. They always yell at me, "Go look at the sign" or something like that. But also too, it's like, do you bring your ID or don't you bring your ID? I still have poll workers asking for an ID, and then you hear, "No, you don't need to show your ID." So the rules are always in flux and changing, and it's like it's the voters who suffer, and it's just like, why can't we just cast a vote and be done with it? But yet there's all these little rules and changes that everybody wants, and it doesn't help.
Book everything else in the world on the internet.
Yeah.
You can't vote.
That's another thing the Republicans killed, was Husted was trying to move forward with online voter registration and being able to change your address online, and they spiked that.
And Husted is a Republican.
Husted is a Republican.
So his own party getting in the way. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I think it's another example of him really, kind of being on the more moderate side in some ways. Of course, we do know that he has higher political aspirations. He wants to run for governor someday, but when the whole debate was going on originally for House Bill 194, some of the Republicans wanted to require a photo ID, and that was another big issue they wanted to get in there. It did not make it into the final version of the bill, where some people in his party would have really liked to have had it in there. So, but I do think that it would cause a lot of confusion. When you've got you would have debate going on between the two sides about this bill and everything that's in it. At the same time that people are needing to go and vote early for the November election, I think that there would be there definitely would be a lot of confusion among voters about when is it that I get to vote, and what's going on here. What am I voting on with this issue? So I think it'll be interesting to see if they actually do decide to repeal it. Mike DeWine, the Attorney General, was asked whether they could do this, and he said, I don't see why they couldn't. So
how soon do we have to make a decision on
They
this?
have to do it by the summer. in order to get it off the ballot in November.
There's still time. We have just a couple of minutes left. I want to talk about the State of the Union speech from Tuesday night, and what, if anything, you guys see stands out to you, or could have a bigger implication on the folks here in Akron. I did like that the president said he would create this commission to help veterans get jobs as police and firefighters. That sounds great. Who's not going to applaud that? But where are their jobs for police and firefighters? I just don't know where those folks are going to find that benefit.
Yeah, to me, the biggest message coming out of this for our area is the manufacturing, this emphasis on bringing manufacturing jobs. And there is some evidence that the cost of production and shipping things overseas is shipping them back here from overseas is getting to be burdensome. So there is some indication that there's manufacturing facilities that are looking at manufacturing companies that are looking about coming back to the United States, and that would be great news.
Anything stand out to you guys?
Well, I think the manufacturing one was definitely a big one, and he talked about needing more job training to get people ready for those kinds of jobs. So I think that's obviously a good thing for our area. Jobs, 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 as they always say.
I saw Tim Ryan tweeted, or his staff did, that Russ Pry was with him at the State of the Union.
Right.
So I'll be interested to see what Russ takes away from this. Because I like the State of the Union when they get them all, it's all jammed in there. But, so much of it is already choreographed. They know where the cameras are going to go, what people are going to say. President Obama played the bin Laden dead card pretty early in the speech.
And I think that's trying to the message that he wants to portray is that he has been successful in a lot of these endeavors in the Middle East, bringing down bin Laden and the other attempts there. He's pulled all of his troops out of Iraq, and he said that's the first time in 9 years, whatever, that any president can say that. Sure. So people were critical, I think, of his ability to be a leader, and now he's not. He's shown it. He's done well.
And precursor to him getting out of the campaign trail. Steve, Phil, Stephanie, thank you so much. Thanks for being with us. We'll see you right here next Friday for Newsnight. Good night.